The Trump administration announces action against the state of California for forcing churches to fund abortions. This could be huge, guys, if it's enforced, and what this looks like for other states. Also, a New York City exhibit stresses that abortion is normal, and Reddit user brags about heading to Planned Parenthood to quote, purge the two parasites and goblins from inside of her. That's a tragic story. Also, then we talk about the eighth Texas city to ban abortions and what that looks like legally. And then, of course, we're going to cover the historic 2020 March for Life that happened this last weekend. All that and more on this episode of Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Okay, without spending too much time on this because we have a lot to get to today, if you've been following me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, that this weekend I was in DC for the 47th annual March for Life, which was amazing and historic for a number of reasons. First of all, because if you didn't already hear, Trump spoke at the March for Life, which you might think, okay, that's cool, whatever, he's pro-life. No, you guys, he is the first president in the last 47 years of the history of the March for Life to speak at a March for Life rally. That's amazing. Especially because if you look back, we had the Bushes. We had various presidents that claimed to be pro-life, but they weren't speaking at the March for Life, which is a little bit crazy to me. So not only was this a huge just morale booster for everybody in the pro-life movement to know that, hey, you know what, those of us who maybe took a chance with Trump, or if you're like me and you didn't vote for Trump initially, going into this next presidential election, having the confidence to know that, hey, you know what, if there's one issue, if I was ever going to be, and to some degree I am, a single issue voter, and that is the pro-life issue. And so having Trump speak at this rally, and especially using such a bold and convicting language to support the pro-life movement, it gives pro-life voters the confidence to know that, hey, we might not agree with everything that Trump promotes, we might not agree with everything he says, we might not really love what he tweets, we really might not be a huge fan of his dealings with women, the way he speaks to women or about women or has treated women in the past. There are some reasons to make evangelical Christians or even just decent people question Trump, but we can know going into this next election that Trump will be and continue to align with the pro-life movement in very, very strong ways, but not just in his language, but also in his action, which we're going to get to in just a minute about California. But I'm going to post, if you've been watching on YouTube, I've got some pictures rolling here of the March for Life and some of the best signs that I saw. And it was just an amazing experience, truly uplifting on the most conservative estimates, the smallest estimates as to how many people were there. It's the smallest number that you could say were at the March for Life this last weekend and this is very, very low, but just so that, people couldn't call Students for Life a liar when they did their estimates in their time-lapse video, which is amazing. Definitely go check it out. I've shared it on all of my social media platforms. But on the most conservative side, it's well over 200,000 attending. On the higher estimates, we've got about 500,000 to about 500,000. So, it doesn't matter where exactly that exact pinpoint number is, but what we do know is that there were hundreds of thousands of people there, tens of thousands of students of every age. It was an amazing, uplifting, incredible event. If you weren't there this year, please make it next year. My prayer is that by continuing to support the pro-life movement, not just with our words, but with our actions, that by the time I have kids old enough to go to the March for Life with me and hold their own signs, that maybe we'll be marching in celebration to the end of the abortion laws and the abortion culture in our country, and we'll have a culture of life again. Speaking of culture life, shout out to them. If you saw, I wore like all of their clothes and hats and scarves and dresses all this weekend, just do everything I could to represent life in every way. So if you haven't yet heard of Culture of Life, they're a pro-life fashion company. If you're tired of your money going to Planned Parenthood inadvertently when you shop at big companies that give money back to Planned Parenthood, then maybe you look at Culture of Life and talk about options where you can buy fashion that gives back to pro-life organizations. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. Speaking of Trump and not just saying he's pro-life, but actually acting on that, there's a lot of examples, but the most recent is the Trump administration announced that they are pursuing action against the state of California for forcing churches to fund abortions, which I think is absolutely just beyond immoral. It's disgusting, truly disgusting. So it says in an article from LifeSite News, which shout out to LifeSite News, they're amazing. If you don't know where to get your pro-life news and just, your good news or your bad news, whatever it is, go to LifeSite News. I highly recommend them. I was able to spend some great time this weekend with some of the LifeSite News crew. Shout out to Rebecca and Danielle. Got to march with Danielle and get coffee with Rebecca and Danielle. It's truly lovely. But back to our topic here. So essentially, the Department of Health and Human Services, so HHS, they said, we're putting California on notice that it must stop forcing people of goodwill to subsidize the taking of human life, not only because it's the moral thing to do, but because it's the law. Okay, so they're stepping up their game here and saying, hey, it's not just immoral, but it's also against our current laws. So we're gonna crack down and make this serious for you. So the Trump administration, Department of Health and Human Services, announced on Friday that the state of California is violating federal law by trying to force churches to pay for abortions. A lengthy legal battle has been underway since 2014, when California enacted regulations forcing all employers to pay for health insurance plans that cover elective abortions, regardless of religious or moral objections to funding abortion deaths. Under these regulations, all abortions are considered, quote, basic health care and medically necessary, which, if you've listened to me for any amount of time, and I've linked to lots of articles, abortion is never medically necessary. There are a few exceptions where someone would argue that it is medically necessary. For instance, in an ectopic pregnancy, even that is not the case. In that case, an abortion is still not medically necessary because you're not performing an abortion. You're performing a life-saving measure for the mother that unfortunately ends up removing a fetus that can't survive outside the womb. But the goal is not to kill the child. The goal is to save the mother, making it not an abortion. It's completely different. So churches were not even informed in California when abortion coverage was added to their health plans, according to the Alliance Defending Freedom, another great organization, by the way. The HHS Office of Civil Rights announced that it issued a notice of violation to the state of California, formally notifying the Golden State that it cannot impose universal abortion coverage mandates on health insurance plans and issues a violation of federal conscience laws. Basically, California has already deprived over 28,000 people of plans that did not cover elective abortion, but now must cover abortion due to California's mandate, according to HHS. Now, with this notice, they've given them 30 days to comply, or they're going to move forward and prosecute, and that could end up meaning that the state of California gets taxpayer dollars and federal dollars withheld from the state of California, which would really hurt them, and I don't think that they would be okay with that, so they would probably end up caving and fixing this issue. But either way, the fact is the Trump administration isn't just saying we're pro-life and giving lip service, but they're actually putting action behind that, which to me, as someone who really doubted Trump going into 2016, is a huge relief to just see this over and over and over, that Trump really does mean it when he says that he's pro-life, and his administration, which is huge. Again, here it says, once again, President Trump's administration is delivering on his promise to protect human life and all Americans' freedom of conscience, says the HHS Secretary Alex Azar. Under President Trump, HHS has been vigorously enforcing the statutes Congress has passed to protect Americans' consciences and institutionalizing these protections within the department's civil rights work. Again, they're given 30 days to comply, or else they're going to have potential huge revocation of federal funds. Well, I'm really impressed. This is great news. I should have said this for good in the world, but we have a lot of stories that I want to get to. All right, now something I want to focus on for just a brief minute is sometimes in the pro-life movement, and especially on the conservative side, we can get a little too tight in our conservative bubbles, and we can really get into this mentality of us versus them. We can get into this mentality of just unkindness, to put it really gently. And something that has really softened me has been in the last year. Before, I would have been the first person to shout baby murderers and baby killers, and I would have been the first person to say and use really harsh language. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use harsh language in the right circumstances and in the right settings, but the truth is, and this is actually something I told the Federalist Papers, who interviewed me at the Save the Storks Ball this last weekend. They asked me, because I went to a pro-life ball, the Save the Storks Ball, and there were some very hefty I don't want to say pro-choice, because they're not really pro-choice, pro-abortion activists outside protesting this event. And the Federalist interviewer, she asked me, well, what do you think? What do you have to say to these protesters? And the truth is I have to say, we love you. That I'm sorry that you're in this place of pain and hurt, because I do think that the angry, outrageous behavior of many of these supposed pro-choices, but we know they're pro-abortionists, it comes from a place of hurt and a place of pain. And something that softened me in the last year is just becoming more familiar with Abby Johnson's movie and book, and then her as a person, her and her husband are truly delightful human beings. And it really gives you a look on the other side, and how do we really reach abortion-minded women and even abortion workers? How do we really bring forth the compassion in the pro-life movement? And in line with that thinking, I want us to really kind of, especially as conservatives, and because I know a lot of you are even evangelical Christians and conservatives, I want us to stop thinking in this us versus them. It's an us wanting to love them. And more than that, it's coming together with those we don't agree with on any other subject, but we can come together where we do agree, which is the pro-life movement. One of the most inspiring people I've had the pleasure of meeting lately, and especially this weekend, was State Senator Katrina Jackson from Louisiana. And she actually spoke both at the March for Life and the Save the Storks Ball, but she is a Democrat. She doesn't agree with me on a lot of things, and I don't agree with her on a lot of things. We're in different political parties, technically, even though I identify more as a conservative than a Republican any day. But the truth is what we can agree on, what we can find solidarity on, is our value, our mutual value for the sanctity of human life. And I want us to have more of this. This inspires me. I hope it inspires you. I want to see this kind of unity. I want to see men and women of every background, atheist or Christian or Democrat or liberal or Republican or conservative. I want us to see us come together on what we can agree on, especially this important issue of life, because I believe it is the most important issue of our time. So Katrina Jackson, a little bit about her. She is a 42-year-old African-American lawyer who has described abortion as the modern-day genocide, has also asserted that pro-life advocates are gaining ground, which we know is true, and it just feels really great to hear this from another woman of color, but also, more importantly, a Democrat, because we can come together on this important issue. Now, she said at the March for Life, quote, "I tell people all the time that this decade will mark the major fight for life." She told the hundreds of thousands of people who were cheering at the Washington Mall for this year's March for Life. She says, "Because at this time, we're about to turn the situation around. I see the bans and the chains dropping off of Roe versus Wade. I see people and babies born everywhere. I see us celebrating life like never before. This decade that in unity, this is the decade that in unity we will fight for life." I mean, that's beautiful. That is so profound. And this is coming from a Democrat woman. This is me coming to you saying, please bring down your walls. Remember, it's not an us versus them. It's an us looking to love them. And that's the mind frame I want us to move into. And it truly has just been in the last year that this year has really worked on my heart to move me to this place. Jackson actually went on to talk about how Louisiana is one of the most pro-life states because she says the majority of Democrats elected in her state are pro-life, which is amazing. In fact, their Democrat governor, John Bel Edwards, signed a fetal heartbeat bill into law in May that had been passed by bipartisan majorities in both chambers of the Louisiana legislature, including 17 Democrats in the House and 7 in the Senate, one of these being Jackson. Jackson has also sponsored the Love Life Amendment that would put a referendum on Louisiana's 2020 ballot to amend the state constitution to declare no constitutional right to abortion that was actually passed by the Senate in May, including votes from 9 Democrats and 5 opposed. All this to say, remember when you're speaking about the, quote, other side, they're people that maybe aren't always the other side isn't always who you would think they are. And not only that, but someday that, quote, other side is going to be the side that fights most fearlessly and faithfully for the unborn. And I'm thinking about Abby Johnson, okay? So all that to say, we can find unity on this issue. We don't have to be divisive. We don't have to play into the outrage, mob-like mentality that our modern mainstream media tells us to be part of. And quite frankly, even some of our conservative media is very mob outrage minded. And I don't want to see us fall into that trap. It's not healthy for us as individuals. It's not healthy for our country. It's not healthy for anybody. And it's definitely not going to find the long-lasting change that we need, that we can find in unity. All right, now very briefly, if you haven't already heard about this, a little bit of background. In the New York City is having an expedition that they're basically, the theme is abortion is normal, and it's raising funds for Planned Parenthood, which is of course sickening. But the truth is if you look at the Abortion is Normal website, there are several examples of the art, much of which I would say is very sexual in nature, but there are nude photographs and paintings, figures wearing "Thank God for Abortion" shirts, paintings of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and various sample displays of rudimentary written slogans and buzzwords like choice and "Dear Judge Kavanaugh, if you don't like abortions, don't get one." So all that to say, the left is freaking out. That's the simplest, nicest way to put it. I talked last week about Planned Parenthood and their record amount of giving to the election this year, because they say it's a life and death issue, which of course we've known that for years. It's a life and death issue, but not in the way that they're describing. We're describing in a way of, yes, it's a life and death issue because over 60 million babies have been killed. So yeah, it's a life and death issue for the millions of babies being killed and the women who are being harmed. So this event's website explains the expedition as it brings together a heterogeneous array of artists countering with their personal responses to abortion and abortion access in order to create, get this, in order to create an inclusive and empathetic entry point into this conversation. Okay, so my question is, inclusive for who? Inclusive for the children that you're mass murdering? Inclusive for the women that you scream down and say that they aren't real women if they don't support abortion? Inclusive for the men who have lost their babies because you didn't give them a voice in whether or not they could raise their child? That's really inclusive to you? Okay, yeah, no, not at all. Or empathetic. Empathetic to who? Empathetic to the fathers who lost their babies, empathetic to the women who regret their abortions, empathetic to the women who had abortions, botched abortions, and died, or had to have their uterus removed, or had severe life-threatening infections. I mean, empathetic to the babies? What is this madness? Truly, truly ridiculous. Now, of course, proceeds for the event will go to Planned Parenthood's 2020 campaign. But the truth is I want to see a counter. I want to see, to be honest with you, I know that there's a lot of pro-life artists out there. A lot of you who are pro-life artists have messaged me on Instagram or shared your work or tagged me in your work, which is amazing. Please continue to do that. I love to share pro-life artistry work in every form. But I want to see someday us doing a celebration of life with pro-life artists. I want to see us take the money for that event and give it to women who need help. so that we can support them in their pro-life journey and their decision to choose life. All right, now, unfortunately, I'm going to share with you one more devastating, just sickening story of abortion. But there was a Reddit user who just in this the last month or so, she was bragging about going to Planned Parenthood to purge 2 parasites or goblins inside of her. She was pregnant with twins, and she wrote on Reddit, quote, "I'm on my way to Planned Parenthood to purge the 2 parasites that have somehow implanted into my uterus despite me being on the pill. I can't bleeping wait to stop being nauseous and throwing up and being unable to keep water down. I can't wait to be rid of this hypodermis gravidarum that destroyed my Christmas and ruined my New Year's Eve and is ruining my life." Let's pause right there before I finish reading the rest of it. I don't want to just not address this, because the truth is pregnancy is hard. Let me say that again. Pregnancy is hard. So hard. It is not nothing. I think sometimes we as conservative pro-lifers, when women say it sucks to be pregnant, it's hard to be pregnant, it's hard on my body, it's hard on my psyche, it's hard on my relationships, I don't want to be pregnant, I want an abortion. Well, we as pro-lifers, we kind of skip right past that and be like, oh, you're tough, whatever, get over it, don't kill your baby. And I get that, because you're right, no amount of hard is worth taking a human life. But at the same time, I don't want to just breeze right past this like that just doesn't exist or doesn't matter. This does matter. Pregnancy, as hard as someone who has gone through almost the entire first trimester of a pregnancy, it was brutal. Absolutely brutal. Not being able to keep food down, maybe if I'm lucky, keeping half my food down, constantly nauseated, on the edge of throwing up, so exhausted, you feel like you're a zombie all day. Then you try to sleep and you can't sleep all night because of cramps and restless legs, and it's really hard. I am not discounting that this is not, it's not hard to go through pregnancy, but as Allison put it from Live Action, she put it, I'm paraphrasing, but she said, can you get through the next 9 months so that someone else can have the next 90 years? So yeah, it is a sacrifice, and you know what, it's a hard one, but can you just get through, even if you don't want to be pregnant, even if it's really, really difficult and does change your life, can you put aside your life and sacrifice the next 9 months so someone else can have the next 90 years? I would say that's worth it. And if you believe in the sanctity of life, even if it doesn't feel worth it, it's the right thing to do. She continued, she says, I can't, okay, so I read, she says, I can't bleeping wait to be done with the anxiety of knowing these things are in my uterus and knowing that I will not have to birth dribbling horror goblins and will not have disgusting leaking breasts and will not go home from the hospital in a nappy and with a stitched up vagina. I will not have postpartum depression or be left disfigured with stretch marks. My relationship with my significant other will not be ruined. I am dedicating this double fetus purge to the anti-choice movement because no matter how hard you try, you will not force us to be your handmaidens. Happy 2020. Also, she did mention specifically in here, she was on birth control. I have done an entire episode on birth control. I really recommend you go check it out. But the truth is birth control culture does lead and is deeply connected to abortion culture, and I explain that in depth, so please go check that out. I think the title of the episode is called Birth Control. So this woman whose username is 4 a.m. curfew has since responded to the story as well, basically saying she has a much better life because she had her abortions, and basically she just said, it was the most sad thing. Here we go. The quote is, I'm sorry so many forced birthers don't want to face the uncomfortable truth that motherhood is life-destroying for those who don't want to be mothers. And she said, you will not make me be ashamed. I do not regret my abortion, my body, my life, my choice. Oh, honey, someday she will understand, and it might not be in this life, it might be in the next, but someday the gravity of the situation will hurt her. And you know what? when she says that motherhood is life destroying. No, abortion is life destroying. Abortion takes lives. It would have only taken you 8 to 9 months, depending with twins, sometimes they come earlier. If you could have just sacrificed and held on for a few months to give these 2 children the next 90 years. Anyways, before I continue on, I want to just ask that you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review. It's 2020. Leave that 5-star review. Leave some kind comments. It really, really helps with the iTunes rankings. Go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. Especially, we've got some fun stuff coming out. And if you like watching on YouTube, where I include a lot of pictures and videos in my podcast, that's a great place. In fact, if you want to be extra awesome, go ahead and subscribe on every platform that you are a frequent fan of. Now, let's talk about LifeSite news. This is something that I wanted to cover, not because it's necessarily new, but because a lot of people don't understand exactly how this works or how we can get around it. So basically, the 8th city in Texas bans abortion and declares itself a sanctuary for the unborn, which is obviously, they're playing on the sanctuary city for illegal immigrants. Now, how they make this work, which I think is really interesting, is because obviously this is not super great. It's super great news, but it's not super new news because they're the 8th city to do this. But a lot of people have been asking me, how do they do that legally? How do they get around our current laws and make that work? Well, let me tell you, and it's brilliant. And I wish all over, because the truth is we have states that swing drastically left because of the big cities, but all the smaller surrounding cities are very conservative. So I would encourage every one of you in your local communities to push for this kind of legislation. But basically, the latest town to do this was Rusk, with a population of 5,618 in eastern Texas. And on Thursday, its city council voted 3-2 to pass the measure, as local residents cheered, according to the Texan. The Sanctuary City for the Unborn Ordinance recognizes that unborn babies are valuable human beings who deserve to be protected under the law. The ordinance prohibits doing surgical and drug-induced abortions within city limits. Some lawyers have warned towns about passing the ordinances because of potential legal challenges. The U.S. Supreme Court took away the power of the state and local governments to protect unborn babies from abortion through Roe versus Wade. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, this is an article from LifeSite News if you want to read more. Dickinson told LifeSite News that the ordinance takes this legal potential issue into account. He said the ordinance have a public enforcement mechanism and a private enforcement mechanism. The public enforcement mechanism is about future enforcement. He said that the public enforcement part of the ordinance fines abortionists $2,000 per abortion, but the penalty would only be enforced when Roe versus Wade is overturned. I love that they use the language when, not if, when Roe versus Wade gets overturned. In other words, if you break the law today, you could be penalized for that crime years from now, Dickinson said. The private enforcement mechanism does not have to wait upon the overturning of Roe versus Wade and is in effect immediately. This part of the ordinance is about private lawsuits. When a child is killed by abortion, the family of the child can sue the abortionist and the one who paid for the abortion, and the one who drove the mother to the abortion, etc. So it's like a double whammy. They can use part of it now, but they can use the law so that abortionists can be prosecuted via lawsuits. But then they also have that second part, which is going to punish abortionists for every abortion, but it can act. I'm losing the word for it right now, but it can act and go into effect and inflict a lot of damage on abortionists after we get Roe versus Wade overturned, which I do believe will happen in our lifetime. All right, now let's go ahead and end with good in the world. I know that story could have probably counted as good in the world, but I mostly just wanted to explain how and why these sanctuary city things are passing and how that they're really good for our community, even if our hands are a little bit tied by Roe versus Wade right now. In the short term and long term, they have a lot of benefits. So I would encourage you to look into that, talk to your state leaders and local city leaders and see how you can get that done in your community. Now, ending with good in the world, this one makes me really happy, and I don't know if if you're familiar with this before. I talked to a lot of pregnancy clinic leaders and founders and people who have been in the pregnancy clinic area for a long time. And also I volunteered at a few. I started volunteering at one when I was a teenager, back when I lived in Utah. But what I love to see happening is from life to death, when pregnancy centers take over old abortion facilities, and you take a place that is filled with evil and tragedy and horror and bring it into a godly, life-filling, life-perpetuating, life-embracing place. And to me, that is one of the most beautiful things. It's evil being not resurrected, but it's evil being turned, and that same space where evil spirits dwelled, now are being filled with light and workers of good and kindness. So while abortion facilities continue to close all over the country, which is great. Again, this is an article from LifeSite News. I'm doing a lot of LifeSite today because this episode, if you couldn't tell, is very pro-life themed. Pregnancy resource centers are growing and helping numerous women and men find hope and practical help to meet the needs of their families. Some of those pregnancy centers are even moving into the very buildings that once housed abortion facilities and are transforming them into places that save the lives of preborn children. One center, Clarity Clinic in Iowa, wrote last year about its hope to expand its small space that had beginning to feel really cramped. The goal of Clarity's expansion is to create better storage space, better accessibility for pregnant mothers, and separate entrances for those seeking medical or educational services. This center has saved many lives since its founding in 1993. The center, like most, is dependent to provide a variety of services, including free pregnancy testing, limited ultrasounds, post-abortive counseling, parental education classes, and access to items such as diapers, baby clothes, baby toys, and other necessities. The center also gives access to adoption services if the mother chooses to place her baby for adoption, and all these services are free to women seeking them. The building center that currently occupies, it actually used to be a Planned Parenthood facility, and then was actively referring women for surgical abortions and distributed the abortion pill, but now it's no longer a place of death, but it's a place of life and hope. And that is the note I want to leave you on. We can turn our country in another direction. We can make abortion unthinkable. We are the pro-life generation, and in our lifetime, we will see our culture change to a pro-life culture. All that is kind of the theme of this podcast, particularly because I know that sometimes we can get a little weighed down with the bad news. I want to leave you with hope and inspiration. I want to leave you with the message of unity, and I want to see you next week, because next week we're going to go into all other kinds of topics. Also, on a side note, this month is Human Trafficking Awareness. If you haven't already heard me talk about that, listen to my episodes, Pornography Kills Love, and No Porn November. I talk about the link between pornography and human trafficking. And also stay tuned to my Instagram page. I'm going to talk about the connection between trafficking and the Super Bowl, which is coming up. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless the pro-life movement. God bless America.
You want to know why every single person reminds you multiple times through a podcast to subscribe and leave a review? It's because we are listeners too. We listen to other people's podcasts or watch other people's content, and we know that we can love someone's video, but unless someone reminds us, a lot of times we are going to forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a review. So this is your friendly reminder, if you haven't already, to please go subscribe on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok coming soon. And go show the support that we need to continue just making this content. I mean, it's amazing and we love it, but we need you to show that you love having it in your life. So there you go. See you on the other side.